Students around the world are finishing their qualifications so they can get ahead in life and make their contribution. If you are studying, researching, or thinking about it, you will need practical tips, techniques, coaching, and support to help you get finished and be successful. I'm Peter Alkemer, the Student Success Coach, and welcome to the podcast. Each episode, I interview successful students and leaders in education so that you will learn everything you need right here. You will learn about writing, completing your thesis and other projects, planning, discipline, how to get more done, supervisors, getting published, getting finished, how to have the right discipline, and many other aspects of student life. Whether you're listening on Spotify, iTunes, Google, or any other podcast platform, please leave a rating and a review. Or if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. Either way, please get in touch and let us know what you think of the show and what you want to hear more of. Please always check the show notes for links to courses, material, and plenty more so that you can use what you've learned in each episode, take action, and achieve your student success. Please also join the Student Success Coach community in our exclusive members-only Facebook group where I post regularly and you can interact with fellow students just like yourself. Remember, you can't do this alone, so reach out, get involved, and take advantage. It's my commitment to your success. Now for this week's episode.
A little bit nervous.
Claire, thanks. Claire, thanks so much for joining us today on the Student Success Coach podcast, which is just your weekly audio partner of choice. If you are studying or getting into it or struggling with something, people listening today are going to be looking for practical tips and techniques to help them get through all aspects, relating to mostly postgraduate studies, but even undergraduate. We have a very vibrant community on Facebook. And Claire, I've been sort of following you, been studying and been doing great work in your organization. And I'm just so keen to hear from you and welcome you to the show and just want you to take us through, what you've been up to from a student perspective in the last couple of years. So just take us through that journey. Give us an update, please.
Awesome. Thank you, Peter. And thanks so much for inviting me here. So I was a student many years ago. Then I started working, obviously. So I studied initially at the University of Pretoria. I studied biokinetics. So that's an undergrad plus an honors degree in biokinetics. And then I've been working within the organization for the past 11 years now. But I had this crazy decision that I wanted to study again. I was really, motivated and inspired by, I think, my management team who had already done the masters that I decided then to do, and also had the fantastic opportunity from my organization to say, they would give me a bursary, if I wanted to go through this research, this studying. So I've just completed my master's, so an MSc in workplace health and wellbeing. I did it through the University of Nottingham in England. So it was a really fantastic master's to do. It is very diverse. There's a number of different students from different countries, because it is a distance learning master's. So it was great because we were networking with countries like people from Trinidad and Tobago, from people from obviously England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales. There was just a number of people from different countries, and we were all connecting and networking on the different well-being related issues from our different countries, and also our different areas of focus. It was really a wonderful master's to do. As I said, I've just completed it. I actually found out last night, I got a notification last night that I've achieved my master's with distinction. So I'm very, really chuffed at this point. To get here, it was a two-year master's, coursework as well as the research project, the dissertation at the end. So a lot of dedication to it, but it's all paid off in the hard work. It's there. I did a really interesting study from my perspective, and great results. And yeah, I'm really, really chuffed of what I've achieved.
Well, Claire, congratulations. I mean, to get that postgraduate level qualification with distinction and in an area that you're most passionate about. And it sounds like you had a wonderful time, which I want to explore in a little bit more detail. I think you must really be very proud. And I'm sure that there were a lot of people supporting you. And I'm keen to just dive into you so successful and what are those insights that you can pass on to everybody. But I think it's also important just to reflect and to be grateful and to be proud and to allow us, you know, for maybe this is groundbreaking news. So your distinction came through last night, and I'm thrilled to be one of the first people to congratulate you on the podcast. So Claire, absolutely fantastic news and congratulations.
Thank you so much, Peter. Yeah, it's really great. And yeah, you are one of the first to find out. As I say, I only found out last night. So very few people do know at this point. Yeah, in time.
Well done, Claire. That's fantastic. So yeah, let's just dig in a little bit, because people listening, you know, either sort of considering something like this, and as you said, and I wrote it down, it was a crazy decision to go and study again. And I think, you know, there is this perception we study once and then we go in and get on with a career and so on. And you said you were inspired by people around you at the office, etc. And, you know, you had the support financially from your organization, which is fantastic. So there were many factors sort of in your favor. But, you know, just take us through, once you made that decision and you picked the institution and you got into it, and then it was up to you. I mean, you had to then, as you say, go through the coursework and then the research. So maybe let's just start with the coursework aspect. What was that like for you, and how did you handle that extra workload? What were some of the things that you put into place to ensure that you were successful and that you got through that first phase of your qualification?
So I think, Peter, I think one of the biggest reasons why I say it's a crazy decision is because, I mean, it had been 10 years since I'd previously studied, so ever gone back to, you know, university or any sort of work. And also I had twins. So when I started studying, my twin girls were 1.5. So there was those different dynamics of the reasons why I say, you know, it was a bit of a crazy decision. Also work is something that is it's always there, and it's always going to be busy. And I think one of the things that you have to do when you start studying, and to make you successful in whatever that is for you, is you need to be very clear on how you're going to achieve it, with a goal, what boundaries you're going to put in place, how you're going to fit it all in. And I think if you don't write it down and come up with things like what are you willing to give up, what's not negotiable, like how are you going to achieve this, you need a plan right in the beginning. If you don't have that plan of how you're going to do it, I don't think, you know, it's not a realistic goal then. So I think for me, I was quite set on, when I'm at work, I'm going to work. When I come home, that time is for my girls, my family, my husband, my girls. You know, dedicate that time to them. And then once my girls were in bed in the evenings, it then was my master's time. So I had to be quite clear and distinct on letting them, they couldn't, you know, interfere within each other. I didn't want them to overlap. I didn't want to be spending time with my girls and be worrying about work or be here and trying to do my master's and them interrupting, which then, you know, can cause frustration. So I'd really tried to keep them separate to an extent. Obviously, as you get closer to deadlines, those sort of boundaries do start to come a little bit more fluid, but it's, as far as possible, I really try to keep that structure. Obviously, there's certain times within work where you're on a deadline there as well, and you need to use your nights for work. And that was okay, because that was just something that, you know, I had to be okay with. And I think one of the biggest things I've learned, and it's something I do preach in a way, is you need to be kind to yourself. You really, really, really need to be kind to yourself. So if you know, something's taking more pressure and something has to give at that point in time, that's okay. You'll make up, you know, in another area at a later stage, because maybe in a month's time work won't be as hectic, or my master's, I won't have, you know, that specific deadline, and I could then spend more time with my kids, you know. So there was a lot of give and take, I think, from my family perspective. I obviously, you know, couldn't have done it without a supportive family. Having my husband completely on board it wasn't completely necessary, so that he understood that every evening I was going to be sitting and working and not, spending time, but it's about making that other time to spend with him. I've got my sister lives really close, which is also really helpful. So when I was on those strict deadlines, I could go there and work. So once again, trying to keep that, that time when I'm working on my master's time, and then when I'm with my kids, I'm not distracted. I think that's what really worked for me. A lot of give and take at the end of the day. It's a long journey. I've got a lot of people that I'm really got to be so thankful for, because without family and friends, you can't achieve something like this.
No, of course. And I mean, this is your opportunity to do that on this forum, and I'm grateful that you've got the opportunity to do that and to share that gratitude. Claire, I just wanted to pick up on one thing you mentioned, that you wrote something down, you had a plan in place. Was it as practical as that? Did you actually write something down, and maybe just share for our listeners what that looks like and what that could mean for them if it was something that they wanted to put in place if they're at that stage of the study? What was that? Was that something on a wall somewhere? Was it in a journal? Was it like a mini contract with yourself or the people around you? Because I mean, I've heard of all of those, but what was your method?
Oh, Peter, I wish I'd been that proactive, and I wish I could have taken those tips or put it on the wall or whatever it may be. And it was, unfortunately for me, it was something I learned as I went. So as I went along, I worked out my different boundaries. I worked what I was willing to negotiate with and willing to give up and that type of thing. But my advice for anyone starting would be, do it from the onset. And I love your ideas of contracting with yourself. That's a fabulous idea. Rather do that and then put it up somewhere where it's clear to see on a daily basis. And I think also that reminder of why you're doing this. So why is it important to you to do this? So yeah, the 4 questions that I learned as I went along that I think are important is, why are you doing this? Why is it important to you? The second one, very important as well, is, how are you going to achieve it? So like I say, so all those different plans, and you've got to write it down. You honestly have to write it down. And then the third question is, what are you willing to give up? So what time are you willing to? The last one is, what is not negotiable? So it's like, if everything's coming to a complete, it's a deadline, it's panic, you're stressed, because that's going to happen, is what's still at the end of the day not negotiable that you have to include in your day? Because you've got to be kind to yourself, and you've got to do things you enjoy as well. It can't all be, sitting down to study. And I think, while I say that, another very important thing is, you've got to be studying something you're passionate about, because it can't feel like work. And when it gets to deadlines and you stress, it starts to feel like work. But something I wasn't very good at is time management and getting things done, sooner rather than later. And I think for the majority of my modules, I ended up, at the deadline, panicking, working late, and that's when you start to not enjoy it. So it's been really clear on those boundaries and your time management.
And Claire, the modules that you mentioned there, and I mean, I love those 4 statements, and that makes it very clear. And you obviously, even though there were aspects that you worked out along the way, that sort of gave you a little bit of that sort of overall template, if you like, for approaching those decisions as they came up. But just maybe give us some insights to the modules and the learning process and how you consumed that content. And you mentioned that you interacted with other students and it was all online. So, I mean, I guess the world of education, given 2020 and the working world, etc., has all been disrupted and highly digitized. So there's going to be a lot more of that. What was your big takeouts, and what were maybe some of your favorite modules from that perspective that really worked well for you and really ensured your student success? And yes, you might have been interested in that topic, but just give me an insight of what really worked well, because I'm passionate about delivering online content to achieve students' goals. So I just want to hear from you what really worked in your modules.
Yeah, so I think what I was quite in regards to studying, especially, as COVID entered during my studies, is my course, my master's, was already an online-based training, which was really helpful. And I think it was so helpful. So we had things like, there was a lot of lectures that were recorded and then put online. So there were certain workshops during the year that some people could attend, But obviously, being in South Africa, I couldn't attend those workshops for a few days. So everything is recorded. It's it's online. You can access it anytime. And then we also had live webinars every second week. And it was a set day. It was always on a Tuesday, and it was 8 to 10, I think. Obviously, with their time changes, it did change. So when they were in winter, it made it a little bit more challenging because I had to stay up a little bit later for my studies. But that also, it was helpful because I could almost dedicate. I absolutely knew every Tuesday night, even though my webinars were every second week, every Tuesday night was a study night. So it became easier. My friends knew, my family. So if anyone wanted to go for dinner, they knew. It was almost like I was at class. So on a Tuesday night, I was at class, and that was helpful. And then all my modules were essay based. So every assignment was, sending back an essay, 5,000 word essay in, a certain APA style, which is the style we used, which gave us a lot of practice for our thesis, which was really helpful. And we did, obviously I'm in the field of well-being, so we had a number of different topics, and they all related to my daily work, which was really great. And the topics they had, so for example, if we looked at contemporary issues in the workplace, they gave you a brief overview, but you could choose the specific topic. So I always say, don't do what's necessarily easy, do what's find interesting. So with certain of the assignments, like work-related stress, you could have taken something that was really, really easy to do. But at the end of the day, what are you going to get out of it? So I think, whenever you are doing these certain modules, don't necessarily just go with what's easy, just so you can get that pass mark, because that's not why you're doing it at the end of the day. You're doing it so that you can, build on yourself, you can learn, you're learning about something that will be useful in your daily life. And for me, I always sort of chose a topic that was a real interest for me, and something that I can then take that knowledge and share with my team and put it into the workplace, that I could then, better guide our interventions or plans for our organization.
And did you find that there was some linkage between, what you were studying and given the opportunity to write assignments on, etc., and what was going on at work in your role? I mean, that also reinforces the application and the contribution of what you're working on. So, pick the challenging topics, make sure it's interesting, but then equally you've got the real-time opportunity, not 2 years later when you finished your study, but the next day at work in your role, to see the results and the application of what you've been writing up in your assignment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that was what was helpful. And also, if you come across a really great, interesting article that's talking about something we're talking about in the office, you can share that with the team. And, it was things that were quite helpful is like, I did a lot of, one of my assignments I did on, working from home, working remotely. And I mean, obviously it was at a time my organization was really working hard on that anyway. And then COVID-19 hits, and, I've got this essay where I basically summarized all articles that I've read that, can just help. We can look at what's helpful with regards to remote working and what's not helpful. How is it best to approach those sort of things? So yeah, absolutely. It was fantastic that I didn't have to wait till the end of 2 years to come back to my organization and say, hey guys, I've got my master's, so yay. It was this constant, of sharing information and being able to add interesting things to conversations. I think that was really exciting and great for me, is having that new information for a team, and it's a team I've been in for quite a while, and we're all we know each other, and but bringing that extra outsider information to the table was exciting.
That's fantastic, Claire. And then I guess, so you did the modules at the beginning, and then I think towards the end you mentioned you had a sort of a research focus to produce a thesis on a specific journey, and what topic you did and how you chose that. That you chose something absolutely dead center in terms of what you were passionate about. So take us through that journey and what that looked like, as the sort of next phase, I guess, of completing your postgraduate qualification.
Okay. So I think, like you're saying, I chose something that I was passionate about from my organization perspective. So every module we did, what was really great is it gave you different ideas. It gave you examples of the different areas that I could have done of research for my overall master's. And so as you're gradually going through the work, the master's, you start coming up with other ideas. And then it's about then, I think an important one is once you've got an idea is check the research. So start doing your literature review sooner rather than later so that you can see, what is out there. So I had a look at within my organization, I looked at one of our call centers. So I work in a financial service provider, looked at one of the call centers, and what we looked at is we looked at perceived stress levels. So, how stressed are these employees, but how stressed do they think they are? And then the second thing I looked at as part of my research was their psychosocial working conditions. Now, psychosocial working conditions are things like that, influenced by your job, your work design, and that type of thing. So the 7 key areas that I looked at was your demand, so those employees' demands, their control over their demand, their relationships within the workplace, manager support, peer support, change, and understanding of their role. Then once we had a descriptive profile of both their perceived stresses and those 7 key areas, we then looked at what's the relationship between them. Or is there any association between perceived high stress level and high negative exposure to one of those psychosocial working conditions? So whether it was low manager support or low control, high demand, whatever the negative exposure was, and we looked at those associations. And I think it's important from a wellbeing perspective. So that's going to better guide our interventions now. So if I look at that area, which we can assume, that would be similar to the other call centers within the environment, we can look at what affects those employees, how can we better guide our interventions, and what is really impacting them. So we always say, call center agents are highly stressed. Call center agents have, high demands, low control. These are things, we've always assumed, and you can read it in research. But to have that research from a South African context wasn't available. And then also, with these specific studies that I used, or tests that I used, surveys, we can now do a year-on comparison. So we can check, are interventions working? It's just we got better information about our environment, because South Africans, we're a very unique population. So taking studies from other areas is not necessarily helpful for our employees.
And Claire, so okay, that's great. That's the sort of structure and the content that you looked at. So I'm just keen to understand now the mechanics of, completing that. So I presume you sort of went through a bit of a proposal, and then you got into the field and you did some data gathering. So just take us through, sort of step by step, and then how you tackled each of those and what you learned as a student, and how you were successful at each of those stages of getting through that overall research project.
Okay, so I think first and foremost it was coming up with ideas, and I was actually very lucky that one of my colleagues also studied the same masters at the same time. So I think that's also really helpful, and that's something I recommend, is have a study buddy, like somebody who you can soundboard ideas. And I was very lucky. The individual, my colleague, he was one of those people who's not open. It was very open. So not one of those who tries to hide the amount of work they do, or try to hide his studies. It was that partnership that we had, that if we found interesting information articles, we shared it with one another. So we bounced a lot of ideas off each other and areas that we really, really wanted to focus on. So once I'd always, had a key interest in the call centers, because I know that's an area where we've always wanted to do a lot more work. So from an organization perspective, it was really helpful. So once I'd come up with my idea, I obviously then pitched it to my manager. Once she was happy, then we pitched it to the human capital, so the HR team of the specific area I wanted to do my studies in. So once we got agreement there, we put it all together. There was obviously a lot of testing, so we put a survey together. So I did an online survey, tested it with my team, their HR team, just to check everything comes across correctly. Because once you're in the studying field, what you may understand, so what you read and you think that makes perfect sense, for somebody else they may not understand. When you head down in the studies, finding layman's terms actually becomes quite difficult. So yeah, it's really great to test your survey on somebody else. I had quite a big challenge in that when I was about to send out my survey, COVID had hit. So we were at the point, I'd had quite a few challenges. So first of all, the ethics committee of the university in England had gone on strike as we'd submitted my ethics approval application. So I had to wait for that to happen. So they were on strike for 3 weeks, came back, and then I got my ethics approval and I had the go ahead, and I got the go ahead as Cyril Ramaphosa had said, okay, we're going into lockdown, basically shut down. And I think one of the biggest challenges, even though it was an online survey, is these employees who'd gone from working, in the office every day were now working remotely, and they had a lot of challenges of getting used to it, connectivity. So it wasn't the right time to send out my survey. So I had to wait. Patience is not something that's big in a master's student. So that was, there's a number of challenges, and you just got to overcome. And, like everyone says, it's no point in worrying about what you can't control, but that is easier said than done. So I did have to wait, for the right time to send it to those employees, because I think also during COVID-19, a lot of people were just trying to survive. And I mean this from really a mental health perspective of, we just wanted to get through each day. And for somebody to then now send them a survey to complete, I didn't want to do that time. So I did wait. I was patient, and I sent it out when HR said was a good time. So I also had to trust, for somebody else to say, okay, now's a good time for you to send out the survey. So we did that all online, electronically. Sent it out. It was out for 2 weeks. Then I got all my results. Obviously, my response wasn't what I wanted it to be. It was a low response, but given the the circumstances, I think it was okay. It was obviously enough to do a study on. There was sufficient responses, but I would have liked more. But that's also, these are all learnings, and you've also got to accept when you are looking at a master's, there are going to be things that don't go your way. There are going to be disappointments, but it's how you move on from them and making them work for you. I think, and then it was all down to, once you get all the information back, it's working through all the data, the analysis from a stats perspective that you've got to get through, trusting your own stats. I think that was a hard one I had, because what about I write my whole thesis on something that I did wrong right at the beginning? So it was, keep going through that and ensuring that's correct, and then dedicating that time to write.
What did that look like? Because I run postgraduate writing workshops at WITS, and at the beginning of every class, I just run a quick snap survey, and I ask them, who's busy with a final report or a major writing project, and pretty much everybody, because I guess that's why they're at the workshop to write better. And then I sort of asked them again, I said, well, who of you wish that you had started earlier? And they all put their hands up. Mm-hmm. So everybody sort of tends to leave a little bit later than they should. And just only once you get into it, you realize how much it is that you have to do. And now the time is delayed and you can never go back to it. So what did that look like for you? Do you feel that you started early enough? And how did you pace yourself to get that final deliverable, that thesis completed, that really brings everything together? And it's almost daunting in the expectation that you have of putting those 2 years of your life into that single document and making sure that it was the highest possible quality. How was that journey for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Peter, and I think you touched on something that was entirely my world. I wish I'd started it earlier. And even the things that, hindsight's so wonderful, but even things like while I was waiting for my ethics approval when they were on strike, and while I was waiting to send out the survey, I wish I'd maybe done more then. So more of the literature review. And I think that's something for me that took the longest. So, be prepared for the work to take longer than you anticipate. Be prepared that writing, some of it just happens, and that's great. Some of it, you're in the zone, it flows because that's the great, interesting stuff. But then there's some areas that for different people will be different challenges, different places. But for me, the literature review was something that I knew it was going to be longer for me and harder for me. I don't love reading, so it's a big challenge. I mean, why would anyone do a master's if they don't love reading? But it was something that I had to take on myself and put the time in. And I think, thankfully, because all our modules were, it included and involved a lot of writing. So all those essays really helped in preparing me for my master's. For my actual thesis. So that I was slightly more aware, but just the time that you think it's going to take, set aside another 2 weeks. For that writing, it does take a lot longer, and the more time you have, the more you will enjoy it, because it doesn't get to that that stressful stage where you don't enjoy it and you're just trying to write. And like you say, that writing that document, it's everything that you've put in for the last 2 years comes down to that piece of paper, or that pile of papers. So set out way more time than you think you'll need, because that's what it all comes down to, and you want to enjoy it. You've put so much work into, getting your data, going through your data, cleaning your data, doing the stats, that don't let the writing at the end of the day, let the whole process down, and let the enjoyment down. And you may have noticed I speak about the enjoyment a lot, is because you're doing this for a reason. You're doing it because it's important to you, and make it enjoyable. If it's not enjoyable, then it becomes a chore, and it's something that you drag your feet to do, and you don't want that at the end of the day. So.
And Claire, I mean, you mentioned just as you were waiting, to be able to send out your survey, that there were some things that you could have done. I was actually, I had a coaching call with a lady a couple of weeks ago, and they were doing some research on juvenile detention centers in Zimbabwe, for example. And she was waiting for permission. It was also ethics related, to go on site and interview people. And because of the lockdowns and COVID and, sensitivities around going onto those sites, etc., she was getting very delayed and very frustrated. So, on the coaching call, we talked through some options for maybe changing tack, with her methodology. But then I also sort of, asked those questions, whether there were some other things that she could get going with. And, one of the things we spoke about was maybe just to start setting up her final report, her thesis. Just open a document, start laying out the chapters. She had quite a few things that she could put into some appendices, for example. She could already take the work she'd done from a proposal and put some of that into the methodology chapter, and then get going with the literature review chapter. And I think we underestimate how much of that we can get done, certainly in those dead times, but even in the normal course of events, much earlier than we think we need to when we come around to actually handing it in.
Yeah. No, Peter, I think that's fantastic advice for anyone. And I think we tend to become, we're so process driven. So it's, it comes down to, okay, so I need ethics approval, then I need to get my data. But what about, we think we're leaving the writing to the end, but you're so right. And I wish somebody had told me that, maybe a little bit more stronger, or, my colleague was doing it, and I should have probably learned, because he was completely different to me. We were different spectrums. He had everything done 2 months in advance, and I was everything done the night before, throughout the journey. And I knew he was writing, but he'd gotten his data. And I just, if only, I had done that. And if somebody had just said to me, what about doing your introduction now? Or what about doing your literature review now? Or, just those things that you can do. You can write your whole methodology chapter, you know basically what you're doing. Obviously, it'll have potentially some changes, but start the writing earlier, and dead times, when you're sitting waiting, do something. Don't think it's time off.
I think, but look, you got your distinction and you got through it and you enjoyed it. So I think you ticked all those boxes. So, any improvement on that would have just been, would have added to it and, got you through and given you more sort of insights about how to do it, maybe for the next time, if there was going to be a next time for you. Okay, fantastic. And I just wanted to touch on just a specific academic aspect of putting a thesis together. And you mentioned that you obviously used the APA referencing style, but did you have a specific technique as you were going through and needing to cite sources? Did you have that set up? Did you have a reference library such as EndNote or Zotero or something where you loaded those and then could bring them in so that you cite as you write in your document? Was that something that you did?
Yeah, so that is something I did. So I actually use, and funny enough, I mainly used it for my module assignments, but I use Mendeley, you can use for referencing and citations. But funny enough, when it came to my thesis, it almost like I didn't trust it anymore, which is quite strange because I'd use it for all my other assignments. And I did my citations as I went along. So I know, for example, my colleague would use a coding system and he would do the citations later. So he would just say, put a 1 and he'd have a reference later. But I stuck to doing my citations as I went along, and I kept my reference list also updated, which is also something I would also encourage. I remember my first few assignments, I left referencing till the last thing to do, and really not clever of me to do. I was like, I'll just come back and add everything in the correct style, but no, do it as you go along. If you keep doing it, obviously then forefront of your mind, you don't have to think of how to do it. It just sort of happens. I'd had a lot of practice, as I said, there were all the modules leading up to the thesis. But yeah, for me, that's the way it worked. For my colleague, it worked by doing a coding system. So I think it's finding what works for you.
Yeah. But I mean, if people can save a few minutes on a cumulative basis, all of those minutes add up. And if you can automate something, and if anything that you do repetitively, you can have a tool set or a practice that makes you more efficient and helps you work smarter, that's another 5 minutes with your twins, or another 15, 20 minutes with your twins, for example. Why would you be sitting, going through references when you can go and, as you say, have an extra half an hour with the family? And so for me, that automation about working as smart as possible, and having the discipline to be effective during the process and not rely on having to go back, because you're also not going to be in the same frame of mind when you go back. When you go back to it later, you'll have a list of other things that you need to go back to. But while you're in the mode, and while you're thinking about that source and you're writing that specific paragraph or that specific sentence, that time when you're dedicated on, and that headspace that you're in, is the best chance you have of reflecting the contribution of that source and your engagement with it as part of your study and integrating it in with your writing.
Yeah. No, I completely agree, Peter. Yeah, it's just the way. And as you say, the smarter you can do anything, do it. And figure that out also, once again, as close to the beginning as possible. As I said, Mendeley worked really well for me initially, and I don't know why. I used it, so I still use it to an extent. And I also found, why we're talking about, I actually found it so helpful to store all my articles on, because what you can do on Mendeley is you can highlight and it stays there. So it's not like if you read in a PDF or article where, only while you're on it. So if you want to do, you just import it, and it's a click of a button, it imports into Mendeley. Everything is got easy access to reflect back on it. If maybe later you're writing further on and you remember there was something in that article, you can do a quick search, it'll bring up that article, everything's still highlighted. So finding a software system like that is, it's so important and helpful. I know
in EndNote, one of the things that I just found very powerful was when you list all your references in your library, it gives you a 5-star rating system, and I could quickly just order all the references based on the number of stars I'd given them. So even though I had like 1,000 references in my library, I was probably only really going to bring maybe 100 or so into my study, and then 200 was the universe that I was the most interested in. And I could quickly sort on that rankings column, and I could see the 5-star articles and research right at the top, and give me quick access without searching through folders and library structures and everything.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's the way to do it. If I ever study again, I'll look at EndNote.
It's one of those things you become an expert at when you finished. So you kind of, Okay, so Claire, and then just you finished your document. Did you have a defense? Did you have to present at all your results, etc.? How did that work?
not from a study perspective. I didn't have to present it. Obviously, once the document's done, we sent it through. Obviously, from an organizational perspective, I have, I will come back and present it. I'm going to present it to my team quite soon, and then also to the area that I did it in. Obviously, it's completely anonymized. There's no information that can go out that's any identifying factor for the employees, but it's just really, high level. This is the information we've found. This is what we can work on. This is what's really great of what you've already done. That type of thing. So yes, it's something I'll do from an organization perspective, but it wasn't necessary from a study perspective.
Okay, I had exactly the same experience, and a lot of institutions do have a formal defense process whereby you'd have to go and present often to the same panel of people that approved your proposal right at the beginning. Claire, can I just ask for 2 seconds? Sorry, just give me 5 minutes. Sorry.
No problem.
Claire, I'm so sorry. There's a guy who goes around with a trolley of sandwiches, and I'm stuck in this chair the whole day. So if I don't grab a sandwich now, I'm facilitating all afternoon for our customer, and if I don't eat, I'm just going to be grumpy. So that's not good for a workshop facilitator.
No, you don't want to be able to have a facilitator who's hangry.
No, so a workshop facilitator has to think about their well-being.
Absolutely, I love it.
Claire, sorry, sorry, you were saying we were talking about the proposal and defending it, and oh yes, I was just saying that other institutions do have that, but I had a similar approach to you, and I went back and presented my findings to the team at work because it was very relevant to what we were doing, etc. And I also had the opportunity to present it to the Gibbs MBA cohort. So on 2 successive evenings, we had a lecture hall of 200 first-year MBA students, and it was part of one of the modules that they were doing. It was very linked to that. So it was good to refine my thinking as well and make sure that what I'd done in the thesis was very applicable to the real world, if I could call it, by with getting questions and engaging with people on it.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to, I think, also presenting to my team. I think we'll get a really nice, interaction engagement, because we can then talk about the information, because they'll understand what everything means, and we can deep dive into certain areas. So I'm excited about doing that. As I'm doing it at actually this week. I'm presenting to my team. So we'll see.
That's fantastic, Claire. So brilliant. You've got through it. You survived. Everybody around you supports you, and we're thrilled with your success, and you're going to make a contribution back to the organization. So I'm sure that you are going to, reward yourself, continue to be kind to yourself, and, just, spend that precious time with your family. But do you think, is there something next for you, from an academic perspective, or just put that on pause for a bit and come back to it when you think it's a natural next step?
Yeah, so I think for now, it's on hold. Any thoughts of further a PhD is not on the cards at the moment. I think for now it's spending time with my family, that type of thing. My family, my friends. it's been a hard 2 years. I mean, it's not something it's not easy. And I think at the end of the day, nobody can really tell you a master's is easy, but it's worth it. So yeah, I just want to, revel in this moment for now, and just enjoy, like you say, my success. I mean, it's something to, I think it's quite a nice thing to boast about. Maybe, I've achieved my master's with distinction, with a small family, and during a pandemic. It was during a pandemic, majority of it. So I think at this moment, I just want to appreciate that. And yeah, any further ideas of studying, and maybe I'll look at in the future.
Absolutely. And Claire, appreciated it. You deserve it. Enjoy that time with your family. And I appreciate the together this morning to talk through your experience, and the insights that you've shared with our listeners have been absolutely fantastic, very practical, very insightful, and I think, as I said earlier, if they can put some of them into practice, it will absolutely help a massive amount. And the only suggestion I would leave with you, just for thought, is now that you've done that research and you've got the sort of credibility of the institution having a sort of giving you the qualification with distinction, maybe there is an article, a journal article, or a conference, an industry conference in the well-being space where, I often say to students, yes, it's fantastic to have that thesis and send that in, but really you need to get into the journals. So just like, we were all reading the literature that was out there, that comes from research, but you still have to take the step of converting that into a journal article. And I mean, it's actually one of the courses that I teach, and the difference in writing style and approach, although you've got a lot of the work done, and it shouldn't actually be a massive amount of work to do, it's often good just to do that last extra step, because to get published, to get recognized by a peer-reviewed journal, or at least in an industry recognized conference that's relevant to your topic, will be that extra cherry on the top. You've got the wonderful cherry on the top. You've got lots of success to celebrate, and maybe it's only something in 6 months' time that you come back to. But is that something you might consider at some point in the future? Maybe just putting an article together and co-authoring it, possibly with maybe one of your supervisors or one of the people that you mentioned from around the world, and combine their results with your results, potentially look at something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to do something like that. Definitely something that, I would really want to look at doing in the not so distant future. That seems more achievable than doing a whole new qualification. But yeah, absolutely. I think, like you're saying, and even if you can present it at certain conferences or different forums, just to share that information. Because at the moment, I'm sitting with it, my team's going to sit with it, and obviously the university is sitting with, but who else could this be helpful for? And as I said earlier, especially from a South African context, the research is so limited in South Africa. From, if we're looking at stress levels or psychosocial working conditions, I mean, it's not, and we're such a unique population with unique stresses. I think we definitely warrant our own research and our own feedback on that research.
Yeah. Fantastic, Claire. And I mean, other people doing similar research in future would then have access to your article and potentially would cite that as input and a stepping stone for them to extend. I mean, so there will have been a section at the end of your thesis where you suggest future work potentially, and your results and findings should form the basis for them to continue. I think it was Isaac Newton who said we stand on the shoulders of giants. And I always say to people, and one of the challenges is people get to the end and they're so exhausted and they've worked so hard and it's been so tough. The last thing they want to do is now go on and write an article. But actually, if you not enough and you've left yourself with enough energy and you're willing to not let too much time elapse and come back to it when it's still fresh in your mind, and I do take students through this in one of my courses, that there are some specific steps you can take to then successfully get published. And as a researcher, to have a publication and then possibly for that publication to be cited by other researchers builds massive credibility for you as an individual in your specific field.
Yeah. No, I would love that, Peter. I think you've re-energized me. Yeah, it's definitely something I want to look at doing. Yeah, I think I'll chat to you a little bit further about that. Yeah, it's so exciting to be able to get a published article. You know, the possibility even of doing that, and yeah, just like you're saying, getting a little bit more credibility for all the hard work that you've put in. You know, it does make sense to put it out there in a professional manner or formal manner with a journal, and yeah, go ahead that way.
Wonderful. Claire, thanks again. I appreciate your time. Congratulations. The insights you've provided to our listeners has been absolutely fantastic. And I wish you just a wonderful next phase of relaxing a bit, taking out a bit of time, spending it with your family and your friends. And, you know, that Tuesday study night that you had, maybe make that a dinner club night now, or a movie night. You know, institute that as something regular and just restore all those good times. But the sacrifice is always worth it. I always feel that it is. But it sounds like you've had a very balanced and mature approach to your studies. And I hope that people have learned a lot from that today. So thank you and well done.
Thank you so much, Peter. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity. And just as a last statement, is I've said it a few times, but that are studying, just be kind for yourself. And what's so important is make the time for self-care. It's not, you're not going to find it when you really head deep in. Make the time to do something just for you, because that'll get you through at the end of the day.
Wonderful. Well, on that piece of wisdom and advice, thanks, Claire. See you
Thank
soon.
you
We'll have you back on the show.
Perfect. That'll be great. Thank you.
Cheers, Claire. Thank you.